70% of marketing leads never convert. Welcome to a new episode of Revenue Emotion, and today we talk about the handover gap, and specifically handover between marketing and sales. I know it's a traditional topic, of course, to be discussed, but you can easily gain a lot of improvements, and that gives you so much benefit. So let's look at what can be done in this transition. So we were moving from lead generation to revenue movement, and most organizations they are optimizing for the wrong metric. They measure volume, but they lose revenue in the transition. So in this episode, we like to talk about this shift from a static funnel to dynamic movement architectures. But first, let's look at some numbers. Many companies they do not really have a lead generation problem. They have more a lead transition or lead movement problem. And you can see that because like 70% of leads after a recent research has been done, that they never converted. So you can check it in your organization, what's the situation. But in many organizations, it's like that. And they are never contacted by sales. But even so, also 75% of leads, they just die because of they're not followed up or they die between the mechanics of the handoff and things like that. And this all can result in a 16% of revenue leak that is the result of all these internal misalignment. So can you imagine? Because of just misalignment, you lose already 16% of your revenue. So the insight here is that the failure is not so much between departments. So many times I know there is this discussion about marketing department and sales department and being different people, they don't understand each other and so on and so forth. And we will come to that a little bit later in this presentation, also between the teams. But moreover, it's a failure between stages. What stage actually an opportunity or a lead is in, and how we move it from one stage to the other. So, in other words, if you have a marketing qualified lead, MQL, and what it is, we come to that. And then you want to give it to sales. You don't want to give marketing qualified leads to sales. What you do want is you want to give them sales ready leads. Okay, and what it is, that's an important thing to find out. So, and if you don't work this way, then of course these leads will be ignored, and finally you lose them somewhere in this whole process, right? And that's because the whole process, the funnel, and the whole flow, it's not a volume based model. You can see this here, like it's not how much leads do we have. So the question is not how much lead do we generate, because that means we have hundreds of them maybe, but they sit there in this stage and they stay there. Much more interesting is how they move. So the transition, the movement. And I know it's more difficult to measure, and I will show you how you can easily measure this in a moment. It's not, there are tools for this to do that. So the question is more how many leads moved from one stage to the other. And that means velocity. And velocity is speed and direction. So that means you have tempo, you have speed in the right direction. That is velocity. And that's what we want. So that means in this case, it's the correct revenue coming through the different stages. So in the correct direction. So the takeaway here is that if leads enter but they don't move, then there is something wrong in this system, right? Uh, and movement really determines revenue velocity, and that's what we want. We are looking for revenue velocity here. So let's look at the 3 points of failure, why this movement, this conveyor belt can jam. And the first one, obvious, but not done by many companies, is they don't have unified criteria. Or in other words, what is the definition of a marketing qualified lead and a sales ready lead? And also, if there are definitions, and sometimes there are, then I ask when I come to a company, do you have a definition about what is a lead? And sometimes they have. So, okay, what is a marketing qualified lead? But then when I ask somebody else, especially from another department, but sometimes even in the same department, there is another definition. So yeah, that is then interesting because that means we don't know actually what we are optimizing for. And some research show that maybe 50% of organizations they have such a definition. And then you can ask yourself if the definition is really a common shared definition across the organization. That's the next question. So yeah, it's important because then we can also talk about the right triggers. Come to that in a moment to be sure that we have the right leads. The other thing is ownership, and especially ownership in the transition moment. So when marketing generate leads, they think their job is done. And in a way, that's true because they generate the lead. We will discuss in what conditions then. But then sales then receive these leads, right? And they claim then, yeah, well, I received the lead, but it was not a good lead, or it was not the correct definition, and so on and so forth. So the leads sit in the gap. And even though when it is the right condition and all these things are right, in many situations there is a enormous time delay between this stage from one to the other. Can be due to different systems. Marketing send the lead, or it's just in CRM. Nobody look in this CRM system, or it's not correct allocated, whatever. But so the whole process of transition is not so smooth. And the third one, why this not move, is no feedback. It's also an extremely important one. So if we generate leads and we invest in that, we spend money on it, then, and it is not good, you need to know why. But hardly ever come feedback from the field, from sales, why this was not a good lead. So they're busy with all things. You cannot blame anybody, but they're busy and there's just not a feedback loop. So also research shows us that 3 out of 15 maybe receive some feedback why this worked or why it didn't work. And important is to find out why things work and why it didn't work, because then you can easily optimize it, right? That is important. So what really can help is a thing what I call the lead transition agreement. I know there is something like a service level agreement between marketing and sales, but you can better reform this in a lead transition agreement. And this is all about alignment with rules of engagement. In other words, how do we bridge? You see, I have here an image from a bridge, a real bridge, how we come from one side to the other side. And one side sit the marketing department and the other side sit sales. So it's all about moving in the right direction. So we need to engineer revenue velocity and not by fake promises. It must be strict in this level agreement based on actually three components that we will discuss. And that is, what is the trigger to move it from one stage to the other? We talk about timing and we talk about a protection. So let's look at those. The first component is the movement trigger. And that means no stage movement without shared criteria. And what does it mean? If we move from a marketing qualified lead to a sales ready lead, we need to know, first of all, these three things. And that means, does it match our ideal client profile? Okay, now in this episode, we will not too much discuss about exactly what should be in your ideal client profile. We can do this in another episode. But obviously, it's important that a lead matches the ideal client profile, because then everything will be so much better and we have much higher success rates. So that is a firmographics in the first place, and we need to check if that is the case. That's first, before we can hand it over to sales in any way. Then, of course, the intent signals. So somebody come on your website, maybe download something. Oh, we have a lead, and it matches our ideal client profile. Let's give it to sales. No, of course not, because the intent, it's not serious. It's not time worth for sales to spend their time on it. Um, of course, when sales spend time on these kind of things, that is an expensive resource, right? You only want use that when you really have opportunities that, well, let's say, qualify for that. So the other thing is also, is this the right person? And that means, do we speak with somebody, or do we have somebody that it makes sense to contact? So maybe the company is interested, looks like the ideal client profile from a company perspective. That's nice. And there is buying signals. That's also nice. But it's not somebody that can make any decision. So then you can ask yourself, is it worthwhile spending my time on people that will, well, what you already can predict, they will never actually make the next step or be important. So if they're not part of the decision making unit, then you can question yourself if this is important to hand over to sales. It's important that you do this together, that sales and marketing sit together to make this clear. So, what is the correct moment? What are the correct criteria to do this? So, you can co create this. And if you do so, then everybody's happy and they are aligned, and they then will follow this also. That is important. I remember we did all kind of campaigns for Siemens Digital Industries, and they gave us a really very tight definition of the kind of criteria they have for all these stages. And then in the campaigns that we built, that also brought us. That is an interesting story, by the way, because um, they wanted to know these things, right? Is it the right person, etc. But how do you find out? So that means in the campaign you built in questions or other ways to find out if this is the right person. Is there a budget available? So, what kind of intent signals do we measure? And there are different ways of doing so, but it makes you creative thinking to figure out if this information, to come to this information. And so that really helped to, in the end, to have this information and to use then a lead scoring model on this that really qualify for the right opportunities. Okay, first component. Then component 2 and 3, time and protection. Speed is extremely important in success. And that means there had been also research. I like when there is research that we know what's going on, that if there is a handoff, then it's very important how quickly you do the follow up. So if you can follow up within, let's say, 24 hours, that is a requirement that really makes sense to do so. And maybe in some cases, when it is really high intent, you can do it right away. And that really pays off, because when you don't do that, people start forgetting or other things going on, and it just become weaker. So you need a process where first you need leads that qualify according to criteria that was set by sales and marketing in a joint effort, right? And then the thing is, of course, to have a process in place to allocate the lead to the right person. That's also something. So maybe there is one product category for one department and another for another department or region. It's quite common to work in regions. So that means when there comes a lead from a region north or south or west, that it will be allocated to the right person. And that should be like a quick and automated process. And then people can follow up. So the sales team can follow up. That's important. And what's then the protection? The protection is if that doesn't happen for any reason, maybe somebody is on holiday or too busy or whatever, so they cannot follow up, then the system should detect this. So let's say you can set it like how you want. In this case, I give an example: 48 hours, and after these 2 days, then the lead automatically comes back to marketing and can continue in a nurture process. That's important because then you still pay attention to the lead. So there is no leads that fall between these two different stages. So how does it work? So lead is handed over to sales, timer start, and within this time, if sales then start engage, they can accept it. So then it become a sales accepted lead, SAL, what you see in this, and they can continue working on it. And if that not happens, so the timer expires, then automatically it returns to marketing for nurturing. And that means there is no leads that left behind in a so-called, let's say, black hole. So this safety net is extremely important. So yeah, then we want, of course, this agreement. So this revenue transition agreement would actually bridge the gap between this marketing and sales. So put it in an agreement. And this document should not be a document because of a document, but it should be, of course, an, let's say, way of working, right? An operating procedure, like a standard operating procedure along these lines. And by the end of this presentation, I have a template for such a revenue transition agreement. You can download it and you can use it for yourself. So that's nice. And look at the revenue transition agreement. So then the next thing is something what I call a revenue flow review. And this is a review done by the marketing and sales team like together. They jointly do this review. It's not needed to have a long and lasting review, but it's good to have this like a weekly ritual where you diagnose the stagnation and look at what's going on. And the stages in this review is basically there must be like metrics and diagnostics. We look at the stagnation spotlight, campaign response sprint, and an experiment commitment. And let's go over these three things. So we're not asking, do we have good leads? But we are asking, where does it stall? Where does it stuck? And what is the reason for that, right? So that's the main thing. So let's look at these different things. The first part of this revenue review meeting is about metrics and diagnosis. So we want to know what's going on. And as an example, we would like to see what is our conversion between marketing qualified and sales ready leads, and how many of these leads actually move from one stage to the other in a certain time frame. And of course, it's our goal to improve it as much as possible. So if we can upgrade this, and other episodes I will dive more deeply in this calculation, but this has a compounding effect. So if you can only increase this by a couple of percent, then you see already a lot of impact by the end of the result in terms of revenue, but also profit. And that is for every stage. So the same if we look at the sales ready lead to opportunity conversion, is this going down? Is this going up? And very important, the average time per stage. So that also means that we should start measuring the average time per stage. How long does a lead normally sit in a marketing qualified lead level, or a sales ready lead level, or an opportunity level? And why? So maybe we did not do enough things, or maybe we can do more. So in this we discuss in the stagnation spotlight. So we then check as an example, where do we really see that the lead's not moving from one stage to the other? Can be in a specific product market combination that we see that this leads not so fluently flow. And as an example here, in manufacturing lead stalling at the sales ready lead stage. So then you can ask yourself, what can we do to solve that problem? So maybe we must give them more proof, or pricing is not clear, or other things what we can easily supply. We can easily deliver that. And that brings us to the next part of this whole thing. Oh, first I have an example, by the way. I see, yes, here you see the stage movement dashboard, what I spoke about. And here you see literally the movement of leads, all these dots that move, these are leads, and you can also see how many and what are the conversion rates. So to a little bit give some context of what you see here on the screen, the different square things are, in this case, it's pages, online pages, what also represent the stage of the leads. And on the left, we see the traffic sources. So this is an example. And we see like social traffic sources, like meta traffic sources, but we also see the website, and we see our blog, and so on and so forth. We see Google. So that means LinkedIn here I see. And you see from all these different sources come visitors, I would say, to our website. So that's cool. And we turn them into leads. Well, that's all right. And then we come to a sales stage. You see this here. In this example, it's an online sales, but it will be the same, of course, when you have a sales team with sales reps. And you see a conversion also here, like 23% is from the sales page to the sales process, actually. So you can see exactly what's going well and where you would like to improve. So you just plot this on your current process. So this kind of dashboards you can easily apply to what you already have by the stack that you have. You can make this clear, start this tracking, and you see exactly what's going on where. And what I like about this is also that it's very clear where things go right and where things go wrong. So we can immediately work on those things. So then we come on the part two of the agenda, and that is the campaign response sprint. That means that then, if we know where it stocks, like we see in this previous model, this dashboard, we can say, okay, let's then build some assets, or maybe we have them already, to unblock specific objections found in this dashboard. Can be case study, can be objection handling, can be retargeting, can be different things what we can do to unblock this specific part. And then we will start an experiment to test how this works, right? And this way, movement becomes really measurable and actionable. We don't have to do this all manually. There are a lot of tools available, and of course, here you can really accelerate the whole process with automation. And this is a very important part, because what the CRM should do, first of all, I spoke about timing is important. So as soon as a lead is qualified according to your criteria, they meet the lead criteria for sales ready lead, as an example, then the routing should happen as quickly as possible, and this can be automated, fully automated. It can be round robin, so that means people receive leads one after another, can be specific based on conditions. But this is one important thing, that this happen instantly. Then, of course, when you do so, you give sales a lead, it's very important that they also receive the context of the lead. That means all information, full information about the behavior of this lead, and also the demographic factors. So what is the company? What is their position? How is this matching the ICP, ideal client profile? And then what are the behavioral activities they did. Maybe they register for a webinar or seminar, what you did. Maybe they downloaded something. Maybe they visited the pricing page. Maybe they just checked out different of your product or services pages. So you know where the interest is. And this information then, we come to the other side, the mobile notifications, must be delivered in a notification to the sales rep. So immediately sales reps, as soon as qualified, receive a notification with full information about the demographic factors and then the behavioral factors. And also, of course, included is like how to contact this person by email or telephone number or whatever, so you can take immediate action. So this sounds cool, right? If you have that. And you can have that because we can easily set this up and then start working for that. And by the way, recently we implemented this for a corporate pharma company where we have all this marketing information, and we connected the sales team to the system, and we've set up this routing with these behavioral context notifications. And it really opened the eyes of the sales. They have now full information about the full journey of this lead and also the interest levels. And then what they can do, they can now sit together and then discuss with sales and the marketing team what are the things that we can do, what kind of content really makes sense here to get them more engaged and bring them to the next stage. And of course, what I discussed about the automatic clawback. So if the follow up is not happening, bring it back to marketing, and marketing can then continue with nurturing these contacts. Well, this whole has really a high payoff. So if you look at the return of investment of this alignment, you can see 20 plus higher annual growth rates by just removing different barriers. And now we only discuss about the gap between the marketing and the sales department. So in another episode, I like to focus on another one, and that is from sales to delivery or sales to customer service. That's another one where you can win enormous benefits by improving the alignment between these different stages. So, and you can imagine by doing that, I think 38% is an average of higher win rates, but in many cases it can easily double your win rates, and you can double your revenues and also the profits. So when you solve this movement, you really solve for revenue. That's what I like to make clear. It's all about improving the flow, really improve your revenue that you receive on a monthly, weekly, whatever basis. So by doing this, that gives you really a high, let's say, payoff by capturing value just from resolving the leaking in the funnel. Okay, so coming to an end to this episode, what you can do, you can start an audit yourself, review your stage definitions in the first place. Do you have this stage definition? What is a qualified lead? What is sales ready lead, etc.? Sales accepted. And if you don't, then you can set it up. You can use the agreement that I share with you to have a starting point, how you can set this up, and you can agree with marketing and sales to do so. So the second thing is then to measure. Calculate your current stage-to-stage conversions. What are the conversions? And does this match the industry average? Does it match what we expect from it? Does it match our expectations? And the other thing is, by doing so, you also can have a very good understanding about how profitable the whole process is. So where you lose money, where you make money, and if that really works out well for you. Then you can easily start this revenue flow review, right? Just bring it together, start speaking about these different things and see what's happening and how you can work together. And then, of course, like start identify and stalled product market combination and launch specific campaigns that will unblock the highest, let's say, blockers, right? Unblock blockers. So that means movement really creates momentum, and momentum creates the revenue. Okay, so that was our revenue emotion episode for this week. I hope you enjoyed it and look forward to see you in the next one. Visit the show notes where you can download the revenue transition agreement template. Thank you so much for attention and see you next time.